তুমি আছো তো অতীন্দ্র?
হ্যাঁ স্যার, আছি। স্যার একবার কিছু কথা বলুন তো, একবার চেক করবো সাউন্ড আসছে নাকি।
We are going to have a lecture on secularism, religion, and autocratization in Bangladesh. Hello.
হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে, আসছে।
মানে ক্ল্যারিটি আছে তো?
হ্যাঁ, ইউটিউবে ক্ল্যারিটি আসছে।
একটু গ্রুপে গ্রুপে আর একবার দিতে বলো না, মানে দিয়ে দাও না। আমি গুগল মিটের লিঙ্কটা এখন দিলাম, বুঝলে, ওদেরকে, UG1 কে। এখান থেকে কিউ দিলে তারপর তুমি লাইভ যাবে, তাই তো?
না, আমি লাইভ দিলাম এই মাত্র।
লাইভে চলে গেছো? ও,
না, আমি লাইভ দিলাম এই মাত্র।
ও সিডনিতে আছে অবশ্যই। Oh yeah. Hi, Mubashar. Hello. Yeah.
Hi, Shubhajit. How are you doing?
Yeah. Good. 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 So,
Could you share PowerPoint if you want?
okay. Like you want to send us, or you would be doing it yourself?
Maybe I'll do it myself if that is okay with you guys. It's just something to
You.
show.
Yeah. Yeah. You can do it. You can do it.
Is it
Here.
from? Just trying to figure out which button should
Is
I do.
there is this? What is it? Yeah. There is this option. Share screen.
It's called share screen.
Yeah. There's three dots on your screen. Uh, so
I don't find it anyway. I'm saying this.
it's just there. There's
I
this
think it's for you as a moderator, not in my end.
Authendra. Mubasar can't share screen from his end. It's not possible.
Uh,
Yeah.
okay, yes. Yeah. Mm. Okay, thank you.
You got it. পাওয়া গেছে? Yeah. ঠিক है. So should we go live with your permission, Mubasar?
Yes, please.
Authendra, we are going live. Okay. Wait a minute.
Yes, please.
Just forwarding the link to the. Well, so Authendra, I'm just starting then, and yeah, we are going ahead. Uh, well, a very good evening to all of you, and what can I say? I must, at the very outset, thank Dr. Hasan for basically agreeing to deliver this online lecture from all the way from Sydney. He's there right now, so uh, it's quite mid-evening there. So and we are here like starting the evening sort of thing. 6:12. So I really welcome you on behalf of the Department of IR, International Relations, Jadavpur University, for agreeing to deliver this talk and to really sort of deliver this on a very, very exciting topic. I'll come back to that. But before that, let me just for the audience introduce Dr. Hasan formally, and I'm sure that part of his works and his recent workings are there in the on the poster that we have circulated on in social media and various groups with the students. But that said, let me sort of tell you again that Mubashar Hasan is a postdoctoral researcher at the Department of Culture Studies and Oriental Languages at the University of Oslo, uh, Norway. Mubashar is the author of two very, very important books. A great contribution, rather, I would say. I started reading one, but of course, I couldn't finish any. But I started reading one, but I was reading his articles. So one he wrote is Islam and Politics in Bangladesh, which was published by Palgrave, McMillan in 2020. And then in the next year, he published another book, Narratives of Bangladesh, Culture, Politics, and History, which is published from Dhaka, Prothama. He also edited books, which includes Masks of Authoritarianism, Hegemony, Power, and Public Life in Bangladesh. I'm sure he's going to shed a lot of light on that, because today's title, looks close to that. And then he co-edited rather, another book called Radicalization in South Asia, which is a very important book, Context, Trajectories, and Implications. I think this book is edited along with Erit Engelson Root, if I'm not wrong. So, and this is 2019. He has published a lot of peer-reviewed articles, chapters, and one of the very important thing that he has produced is uh, he published a policy paper uh, uh, through United States Institute of Peace, USIP. Also, he wrote in Foreign Policy, Louis Institute's Interpreter, The Diplomat, Al Jazeera, EIR, The Conversation, Open Democracy, and so on and so forth. He basically did his PhD from Griffith University, Australia. And also, very interestingly, in 2021, Griffith University conferred an Outstanding International Alumni Award on Dr. Hasan for his role in promoting human rights and democracy in Bangladesh, which is quite important. And needless to say, his research interests include authoritarianism, democratic resilience, hip hop, rock music, and politics, and radicalization leading to violent extremism, and so on and so forth. He writes in Bangladesh's prominent newspaper, the Daily Star too. So I read that article too, and about the universities also in Bangladesh. So he's going to basically deliver this online lecture on secularism, religion, and autocratization in Bangladesh. And I must say that I, being one who has been working on uh, you know, uh, radicalization of the curriculum on and pedagogy in South Asia, especially in Pakistan, and of course of late in India. So I thought that there's nothing better than this topic that Mubashir is going to talk about, and he being an insider. I mean, we have been in this department. We have had organized a lot of lectures on the bilateral relationships and how that sort of panned out. But this is for the first time, probably, if I'm not wrong, we are going to talk about that how these all has secularism and religion and autocratization has sort of happened or not happened, and how that has happened, and so on and so forth. So I have been, of course, a very close watcher of Bangladesh, of course, because of the historical, cultural reasons, and which is why we can't ignore. Bangladesh is going to have a election very soon, and of course, like India, Bangladesh is also going through, and of course, Pakistan is going through a tumultuous period. Of course, the kind of crisis that we three are facing kind of similar. The extremism in South Asia and the way militancy has been growing, especially religious ones, are really something that needs to worry us. So, in fact, Bangladesh from 1970 onwards, the Bangladesh is a very interesting case. Let me say that in the specific sense that when Bangladesh emerged and India has its own contribution, post in 1971, it basically promised quite a lot to not only to South Asia but to the world, that being a Muslim majority country that Bangladesh is going to be, it basically promised secularism, democracy, and socialism. Unlike Pakistan, because Pakistan from the very beginning, the started sort of taking on a Islamic path, which is not the case with Bangladesh. So Bangladesh basically largely built on the secular foundations. In fact, this whole blood-soaked emergence on 16th December 1971 has basically been on the promise of plural, secular, which is of course religiously and culturally a Bengali identity, as opposed to the let's say Muslim nationalistic Bangladeshi identity. But then there is a constant battle, or let's say struggle. You have Sahabag movement there, and so on and so forth. So this whole ideas are kind of are sort of at stake. But there is a new churning among the youths. I'm sure that Mubashar is going to talk about that. And then there is a newer battle that has started, and both the parties, and there is two important parties in Bangladesh, Army League and BNP, if I'm not wrong. So and the kind of battle that is going on, and but in fact, what I sense, and Mubashir would correct it, that this whole in fact election, as an outsider, I felt that is again taking a religious line, and there is a religious blame game, that who is going to be more secular and who is going to be more religious. So both are sort of trying to address to their respective constituencies, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. So I wouldn't basically talk much, because we are here to listen to Dr. Hasan. And without further ado, I would straight request Dr. Hasan, and thank you once again, brother, for accepting our invitation. And I'm really delighted to host you.
Thank you, Subhajit. It is a pleasure to be here. And thank you for inviting me. Jadavpur University has a special place in my heart. When I was growing up in Dhaka, a lot of Bangladeshi band, rock musician came to play in Jadavpur. I don't know whether you were there in Jadavpur at that time. Maybe you were in school, but it has a special place. It is well known for the student movement, resistance to authoritarianism, and a place where which is well known for exchanging democratic ideas. I have colleagues at Oslo who studied in Jadavpur, and I'm very impressed by her too. I would. So you told me I have like 45 minutes, and if it is the case, I could. First, can you confirm that you can hear me well? So, yeah, okay, great. So I'll put the. So today, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to discuss some ideas that I came across through my research. Before starting with, I should tell that I have been researching religion, secularism, and democracy in Bangladesh since 2008. So it's been how many years now? It's been over a decade. And you could find my articles in ResearchGate and other places. To start the Bangladeshi story, I shall start on that point that there is a story of Bangladesh that is being told by a group of scholars and people who observe Bangladesh. That's a story, and that story is about the battle The story is founded on the battle on secular and religion. And then there is another story. That story is based on facts. And the fact is, when I say fact, I mean some research, surveys, and so forth. Because I was trained in political science, I do try to mix both narrative and facts. And let me try putting my screen and see if I can share. Okay, so what I'm going to do today, I'm going to talk a lot, and I request you to, it could be a bit boring as well, but please keep an eye and see if I could provoke you. That was my point today. So I will start with the point that secularism. When we talk about secularism and when we talk about religion, what do we mean? So I deduce this understanding that when we talk about secularism and religion, and when we talk about secular and religion, it is the assumption that secular is good, religion is bad. Or on the other hand, when religious people argue, they argue that secularism is bad, religion is good. And as a researcher, I tend to take a middle ground, and my point of view that there are a lot of good in both sides. And if we talk about justice, democracy, humanism, and human dignity, then both concepts, both ideas offer resolution. And I read Amartya Sen's Identity and Violence, and he argued throughout his book that how South Asia is historically democratic, and how even religion promotes democratic values to some extent in the society. Okay, so my first point here is that to question the idea of secular and the question the idea of religious in Bangladesh. So when we talk about secular, what do we mean by secular? So my talk is divided into 5 sections. I will give you a bit of background. Then I'll talk about how in my research I find the meaning of secularism has diversity and in implication in Bangladesh politics and society, and how even we talk about Islam, how Islam is diversely interpreted by politicians and society. And so there is no one secularism, there is no one Islam we're talking about. And then I'll present you, I'm going to bore you with series of data, but I think data are important indicators to understand a society. And with that data, I will start with a comparison between a 1964 study conducted by an American sociologist who published his article based on that study that he studied in Bangladesh in East Pakistan at that time in 1964 in the American Journal of Sociology, and how that the core essence of that finding is kind of resonated with a study that was conducted in 2013 based on public opinion on Shahbag. Because I know there was a lot of emotion involved around Shahbag and even its opposition, Hifazat and so forth. But I'll just share some data about what in fact those surveys found. And with that historic comparison, I will give you more data. And it's a collection of surveys conducted by Gallup, Pew, and Resolve Network, which is based in USIP, as part of that research as well. What this series of data that was conducted between 2000 6 to 2017 says about the sociology of Bangladesh, and then I will end with the current trend of authoritarianism in Bangladesh. But my central premise of this talk is based on the point of view that while secularism and religion may offer enlightened governance, and when you talk about religion, there are higher philosophical essence of religion, just and democracy, and there are many more scholars have written it who studied Islamic studies. So when you talk about secularism, when you talk about Islam, there are many good ideas that could be applied in governance to create a just and democratic society. But what Bangladesh's story shows that both ideas, both secular and religious ideas are politicized, and the lower essences of these ideas are politicized to persist an authoritarian trend that is been in Bangladesh since most of the time in the history of Bangladesh. So let me start with that premise that bad ideas of both secular and religious are being applied, politicized, and also public were divided. And within that bad ideas, an authoritarian society is constructed because of this overall politicization of these bad ideas of secular and religious. I'm not saying secularism is a bad idea. I'm not saying Islam is a bad idea. I'm saying that these are heavily politicized by politicians of all parties, and they did it to foster divide and persistent authoritarian tendency. So I have no problem with any of it, but I'm just giving you the background of how I'm seeing it from this perspective. So let me start with the meaning of secular. What secularism mean in Bangladesh? In theory, I'm not going to go into the theories, but if you read my book, or there is an article I've written, it's called The Diverse Roots of the Secular in East Pakistan, 1947 to 71, the crisis of secularism in contemporary Bangladesh, where I trace the formation of the secular in Bangladesh during the period of 1947 to 71. And arguably, this is the period when the idea of a secular Bengali nation, as opposed to Islamic Pakistani nationalism, was coined in by the political forces to foster an imagination of a Bengali root of East Pakistan. Whereas my article, which is published from, you could Google it, I forgot the name of the journal at the moment. So my article argues that with multiple evidence that the particular project of secular Bengali nationalism, in the sense of strict separation of religion and politics, as opposed to religious nationalism, makes little sense in contemporary Bangladesh, as major parties, both Awami League and BNP, are found to manipulate religious nationalism in a society where simplistic and unenlightened interpretation of religion plays a significant role. And in that article, I argue that the idea of secular nationalism had multiple meanings and roots during 1947 and 71. And by acknowledging diverse roots of secular nationalism, it is possible to make sense of contemporary Bangladesh, that is, by all secular indicators turned into non-secular. But at the same time, it is equally important to note that Bangladesh's intolerance is devoid of enlightened application of religion. I guess, it applies to all religion anyway. Those argue, and in that article, what I argue basically is that there is a difference of interpretation of secularism that used to persist among Marxist-oriented middle-class Bengali intellectual who in contrast to masses define Bengali nationalism with a prism that is premised upon various Western political thoughts. And these intellectuals were largely instrumental for shaping the imagination of a secular Bengali nationalism in paper. But that project has failed because this narrative is detached from the reality of masses. As contemporary Bangladesh suggests, majority Bengalis here do not see any conflict between religion and nationality, whereas few of those intellectuals who are alive and were instrumental in shaping secular discourse of the country are no more associated with Awami League, since the party, in my opinion, and I've argued with a lot of evidence in that article and also in my book on Islam and politics, that has moved towards central right position. And is it a surprise that the party moved towards, or is it always been like that? So to understand Bangladeshi ruling party, you need to understand, you need to study it through in a different manner. So it's a party, of course, but the family plays a big role here, the Mujib family. And if you look into the history of that family, and if you look into the biography of that person, I'm not going to name the name in with a clear thing because of legal reasons. There is an act called Digital Security Act that could be applied to anyone if anyone thinks that someone is offending the history of Bangladesh, and which is perpetrated by the ruling party. So I'm just to some extent in that article I argued that the family root is been always envision a secularism, that secularism is not devoid of religion. And Prime Minister has spoke several times publicly that she sees secularism as part of Islam. And I've written more article on that. And she said that there is no space for discrimination of Islam. So that is that. If that is the case, then that secularism is quite different than what theoretical secularism advances. So I want you to take a note of that particular point. And if that is the case, that there is a discrepancy between the theoretical understanding of secularism, which is there are two types. One is the French style secularism, and the other is American style secularism, and that one could argue there is an Indian style secularism. And in both, in American and Indian cases, in my understanding, the society could thrive in religion, but religion could thrive in the society, but the state would more or less would try to balance and try to act as a neutral, a religiously neutral organization, which nowadays perhaps has shifted to different direction, but that is the theoretical understanding of secularism. But that is not the case in Bangladesh, as I mentioned, that the head of state have repeatedly said that religion is secularism is part of Islam, and that explains why Bangladesh at the moment is constitutionally secular, but it also has a state religion, which is Islam. So we're talking about a state which is secular with a religion of Islam, and that is constitutionally the position of Bangladesh at the moment, and that also coincide and resonate with the Prime Minister's explanation of secularism and religion in Bangladesh. So if that is the case, that secularism has diverse meaning and interpretation, and in that article I have explained in detail. I'm not going to talk about it, but I want you to take one point. If you want to take one point, that is that religion plays a significant role even in the secular construction of Bangladesh. And if that is the case, then that it explains why Bangladeshi opposition party BNP has mass popular support base, and why also Army League now in its cover page, the political manifesto, it mentions Allah Sarva Shaktiman, which means is that Allah is the most powerful, and it is mentioned in its at the center cover of the center of its political manifesto. And it's been like this also when secularism was construed in the Bangladeshi constitution in 1972. And in my book, I have demonstrated again with series of evidence that there are so many state policies were taken which were religiously biased towards the majoritarian, which is Muslim and Islam. So I want you to take second note is that say constitutional endorsement means really a symbolic act in Bangladesh. It doesn't mean it is reflected in the policy, and most importantly, it is reflected into the expenditure of the state. So what I did in my book is that I have demonstrated a series of budget expenditure on religious sector, and I have shown that from 1979 onwards, state endorsement, state investment in religious sector in mostly weak Islamic culture and institution have increased dramatically over 6,500%, and the detailed amount that they are in my book. And is it the thing is, am I saying religion is bad or am I saying secularism is bad? What I'm saying is that there is no control mechanism of good governance while using this concept. So there is one thing is the state principle is one thing, state behavior is another thing, and political attitude attitude and other division in the name of secularism and religion is the other thing. So if we agree on that the secularism has different meaning in Bangladesh, then let's come to the point of religion. So is religion means certain similar things to everyone? So when you talk about Islam, do you mean everyone is talking about one Islam? And again, since it is going to be in YouTube, I want to emphasize that my study is the social study of religion. By that, I mean that how people behave in the name of religion. So it's not a study about the theology. I'm not a theologian, and I do not understand, or I do not have enough knowledge about theology. So in my book, I have documented and articulated how the two biggest mainstream parties, Army League, who has been power since 2009, and Bangladesh Nationalist Party, both project themselves as pro-religious. My book has further documented how leaders of both parties have publicly projected their religious identity, developed social policy based on religious culture through a state-funded religious missionary organization, and developed alliances with traditional and modern Islamist parties. Excuse me. So a dominant narrative is that the Army League is the secular party in Bangladesh because the party endorsed secularism in the constitution after the country's independence and reinstated its commitment to secularism by re-endorsing again in 2010. However, Army League also kept Islam as the state religion, so to regard it as secular is an oversimplification. And people I've explained in the chapter on Army League in detail is that how there is the animosity between Jamaat and Army League is interpreted as secularism by the scholar, whereas it's a different thing. In my book and elsewhere, I have explained how religiously conservative policies were framed between even 1972 and 1975, and how secularism as an Islamic concept fostering religious freedom for all under Islamic cultural primacy has been advanced by the ruling party now. And in many ways now public expression of atheism and other things are outlawed, including homosexuality. But it's not following a series of attacks on Bangladeshi atheist and secular writers, bloggers, publishers, and Sufis Muslims. A law named Digital Security Act was framed, making offending religious sentiment and any questioning of the history of Bangladesh and any question about the leadership of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman is a criminal offense. Any person leading, any person offending religion, history, and ruling party leadership may be in jail from 2 to 14 years without any without any bail. But before the and also please note before 2018 election, according to Delhi Prothom Alo, 61 out of 70 active Islamist parties were associated with Awami League or its electoral alliance. In addition, the public adherence to Islam of Awami League's archival BNP is well documented. And also, please note that significant support of Islam by the major political parties has tolerated and facilitated the proliferation of traditional Islamist politics through groups such as Hefazat Islam. And Hefazat Islam is a madrasa-based pressure group mostly inspired by Deobandi tradition, which is Deobandi is in India. However, there is some evidence from journalists and law enforcement officials that the network was manipulated and used by hardliners as well, including those who fought for the Taliban during the Cold War period, and a new generation of tech-savvy Islamists who are more indoctrinated towards Wahhabi and Salafi culture. In 2013, Hefazat demanded the Bangladeshi government introduce the ban on the public mixing of men and women and the death penalty for atheist writers, among others. And Hefazat said it had no political ambition apart from protecting Islamic values and culture. And the point is that Hefazat Islam did not publicly criticize democratic politics, though it spearheaded an anti-democratic social agenda. And in contrast, there is this modernist. So we talk about mainstream parties advancing the religion in their politics. Then there is this madrasa-based party, pressure group, and then the modernist Islamist party, Jamaat Islam, who believes modern politics is a necessary medium to keep Bangladesh Islamic. In an apparent expression of moving away from the vision of its founder, Maududi, who believed that democracy is an evil force of non-Muslim West, activists of Bangladesh Jamaat Islami support electoral politics. And then there are supports of transnational Islamist parties, Hizb ut-Tahrir, and other. And then there is this terrorist organizations, sympathizers are organizing in Bangladesh. But so what I've tried to do that here in this section is that there are diverse political interpretation of Islam. And if you are interested, you could read my recent article, which is called Politics of Constructing Islam in Everyday Lives in Bangladeshi Youths, the good, the bad, and the construction of majoritarian Islam. And in that, it is based on a policy paper published from USIP back in 2017, and it was based in also about how there are different interpretation of religion among the Bangladeshi youth and how they distinguish among them as who is good and who is bad, and how that distinguishing or the differentiation of who is good and who is bad Muslim can or cannot contribute to militancy. Okay, let me now share you with data. It is a 1964 study, and this study has some interesting similarity of a study conducted around the time when Shahbaz was taking place, and there is an eerie similarity. And please do note that when you talk about Bangladeshi nationalism and other stuff, there is of course it was popular and so forth, and many people lost their life, 3 million and others. But it is also a fact that very few systematic studies were conducted during that time. of East Pakistan or Bangladesh history. And most of the writings of Bangladesh history were polemic in nature. Amid the limited pool of research, a survey conducted by Schumann, who is an American sociologist, is worth mentioning. Schumann wanted to find out how ordinary East Pakistani Bengali men perceive the idea of Bengali nationalism. So he wanted to really understand the idea of how this idea of Bengali nationalism associates with mass of Bangladesh. In this regard, in 1964, just 7 years before the War of Independence, which is known as India-Pakistan War in your country, he asked 4 questions to 1,001 Bengalis with little or no educational background and who were employed as rural farmers and urban factory workers. And Schumann's questions were, are you a Pakistani or Muslim? Are you a Bengali? Are you from the district you live? Are you from the village you live? So he wanted to understand how people associate with their identity. And the aim behind this question was to obviously understand the respondents' identities. Schumann found that a considerable part of the sample, which is 1001, and it is in 1964, was largely local identification, answering that with the name of either their village or their district. But a surprisingly large proportion, 48%, preferred to call themselves as Muslims or Pakistanis. A relatively small percentage of respondents, so 42 and 48, did not associate it in his study. That's not my talk, and you could find that study in the Journal of American Sociology. They found that even those who identified themselves as Bengalis had little or no conflict with the idea of being a Pakistani at that time. For most, the Bengali language formed the Bengali identity, whereas for many, the idea of being a Pakistani equated to being a Muslim. So this American sociologist concluded that there was little or no awareness by the ordinary man in East Pakistan about the conflict between this identity as a Bengali and as a Muslim. And Schumann argued that this idea of Bengali nationalism was sweeping across the urban centers, the university campuses, and he's absolutely right. And also argued that when Bengalis revolted against Pakistani military, it was a revolt against Pakistani military operation, not ideological. But that's his point of view. You don't have to agree or not. I'm just presenting you with data. So that's 1964 data. And then the Daily Prothom Alo and the local research organization called ORG Quest conducted a survey from April 9 to April 20 in 2013. And please remember that the Shahbag movement emancipated in February 2013. So within the 2 months of the emancipation of Shahbag movement, this newspaper, which is number 1, conducted this survey among 3,000 sample, I think, and the survey area covered 30 districts in Bangladesh with 750 respondents from cities and 2,250 respondents from villages. Among the respondents, 1,488 were females, 1,512 were males. The survey was conducted at a time when week after week, television footage had been showing people hoisting national flags, singing national anthems, and country songs are broadcast nationally and internationally round the clock. Hundreds of such images were published in national dailies, and I'm sure you got some of those images and writings there as well. An aura of media constructed high nationalism and patriotism devoid of religion was seemingly sweeping across the country. But the survey finding was quite interesting, and it is only 2 months after this Shahbag movement, within the 2 months. The survey found that 57.5% of that sample said that they do not support Shahbag, whereas a significant 16.7% said they do not know about Shahbag. and 2.4% respondents said that they would not express their opinion. And which is really surprising that only 23% said they were in favor of Shahbag. So if you see this finding, and this survey was highly rejected by the supporters of Shahbag, but eventually, if you look back now, that the survey was to the point on the fact that when Bangladeshis came to know that the atheists are leading the Shahbag movement, they stopped going there. And it's really a fact in the face that no one could deny it. And there are many more controversial things. But when this 23% they said that they're in favor of Shahbag, that goes back to the 1964 survey where Schumann argued that Bengali nationalism was sweeping across the urban centers. And do please remember, the Bengali middle class and university educated middle class are the creator of national imagination of Bangladesh at that moment. But does it really matter? It really doesn't matter unless and until you try to make sense that why Awami League and both BNP have moved towards espousing, embracing religion, and they don't. Even Awami League talks about secularism part of being religion. It makes sense when you study the sociology of Bangladesh, and since 2006, there are a series of survey conducted in Bangladesh. I'm just going to share some of it. I think I've been around half an hour. So yeah, okay, I have 10, 12 minutes, I think. So a series of survey underpin that Bangladeshis want their state and politics infused by religious values and culture. For example, over 98% of the surveyed Bangladeshi in 2009 said in a Gallup poll that religion plays a very important role in their life. A Pew survey in 2012 found that 71% of the surveyed Bangladeshis displayed a sacred text in their homes to highlight the importance of religion in their life. Another Pew survey found that 82% of the surveyed Bangladeshi Muslim favor making religious part of the official law of the country, and 71% say that they do want religious judges deciding family and property dispute. And and I could go on. I've written so much about it. I'm not going to go on, but there's an interesting twist here. In 2006, Gallup poll found that 52% of the surveyed Bangladeshi says that there is no discrepancy between democracy and religion. And in recent years, scholars such as Ali Riaz and Christian Sifier have begun to investigate the micropolitics of faith and its impacts in Bangladeshi politics and societies. And these all are available online from Resolve Network. And these studies found that overwhelming number of Bangladeshis want to see some sort of religious law integrated into democratic politics, while majority of the respondents reject extremist violence. I concluded that it could be noted that the meaning of religious law or whatever may differ widely. However, it would not be inappropriate if one argues that these findings do not take into account that Bangladesh hosts a non-secular society which demands a non-secular state and polity. The state at the same time, I argued that promotes many policies reflective of religious biasness, but does it really matter? As long as there is justice there, it really matters in the sense that there are a lot of politics around it, but no one is applying any just or social behavior that is reflective of equality. And I'll conclude with some data about the Bangladesh at present, especially the liberties and justice, where it stands. So according to the World Press Freedom Index, Bangladesh ranks 162 out of 180, and it is been persistently scoring lower than Afghanistan. And if you look into the democracy indicators that are employed by a variety of democracy, it calls it electoral autocracy. Economist magazine's democracy index calls it hybrid regime, which is also a non-democratic regime. And State of Democracy report puts Bangladesh in the same category as Cambodia, China, and places like that. And then there is this rule of law index. Bangladesh performs 124th out of 139 countries. And what does it really mean? It means that there is, if democracy is about human supporting human dignity and freedom, which is fundamental for every one of us, that is not present in Bangladesh at the moment, right? Because no indicators are really applied showing that it is a democracy. And if someone writes that it is a democracy, it's a writing, it's a polemic, which is devoid of any measurement of any sort. But is it, and what are the other complexities? The complexities is that I argue that this idea of secularism, this idea of religion, these all are really masked. These all are really masked to, these really don't matter to the rulers that much. Any ruler, whoever is in power, because their lifestyle is not really neither secular, neither religious, nor religious. What is common is making money. And most politicians are rich, most rulers are rich, and they want to generate wealth. And this whole idea that secularism and religion and this whole thing that we discuss passionately in the university campuses really matter less to whoever is in power. And in that note, I just want to finish that when I say wealth and generation, how that also kind of applies to the control of media at the moment. There's one study recently that came out of Center for Governance Study, which found that almost all the media outlets are owned by big business groups with business interest in 4 sectors: banks and financial institutes, insurance, energy, and real estate. And these all are connected with the ruling party. So how this system is persisting? So at conclusion, again, I'm saying that this religion secular binary is a construction to move our attention away, whereas the main thing is wealth generation and keeping the power. So there is an unwritten pact between the political leadership, security and civilian establishment, and select businessmen. Top security officials, civil bureaucrats, and politicians are filthy rich. You could even find that Bangladesh at some point was making more millionaire than anyone else, in millionaire in dollars than anywhere else in the world. They send their children to receive education in the West, buy properties in the West, settle down in the Western cities after retirement. And narratives of counterterrorism, religion, secularism, development are just masked to guard rights violation and justify election engineering. And as a result, Bangladesh is where it is now. And on that note, I will finish my talk. Thank you so much for listening to this rather, I would say, boring talk. Thank you.
Not really. But am I audible, Otindra? Can you hear me? Otindra, am I audible? Okay. So, well, thank you so much for this lecture. It's not really boring. It's really a very, very exciting lecture. I was like paying like rapt attention to few things that I thought that would generate because you have really problematized few things, and it would surely provoke certain questions from the audience, or maybe also I would have some questions. But as you said that, I mean, the Prime Minister herself has said that secularism as part of Islam is something that needs to be sort of introspected with in terms of that what is the state's approach, or how state views secularism and religion, which is a very, very important, let's say, aspect to look at. And also, it's really, really worrisome to see that there is a massive budget expenditure in religion sector, and to sort of Islamic culture, and which is again, I mean, since it's also a country where there is a lot of minorities and others, so it's going to really have a long-standing impact, and it is probably impacting. And also there is this new emerging, as you said, and I totally agree with you, that tech-savvy uh, uh, Islamists, and we have our own share in India, and probably this is this has emerged as a very new syndrome in South Asia, that these are very, very educated lot at times from great universities. They have doctorates, they have masters in social sciences, and they are promoting religious extremism, or let's say religious extremist thoughts. And in Bangladesh, and there is another important thing, I think, if you for a minute you can shed light that, I mean, Islamism in terms of the public watch and sort of things, that how it what I found that Islamism has been publicized, or let's say normalized, to sort of give a sense that this is the every day of Bangladesh, and it's hugely expanded. A lot of very, very popular YouTube channels are dedicated. Islamic channels are there, which basically regularly broadcasts, telecasts these lectures, and these are very, very partition, very, very orthodoxical kind of. In terms of even it also is against the liberal Muslims of Bangladesh, and those would like to sort of perform the religion in their own ways. And again, then on the top of everything, there is Digital Security Act. And very recently, a journalist has been arrested, probably Pratham Alu. And coupled with, there is a huge political corruption. There's a huge political corruption. And South Asia is probably famous for its very, very innovative nature of political corruption, which is socialized, let's say. And also, I feel that somehow in Bangladesh, religion has been socialized uh, uh, in a broader sense in the public sphere. So even I wouldn't resist myself to say this, that I come across few dramas, the regular dramas, which is Bangla যেটা আমরা নাটক বলি. I mean, there has been a huge change, Mubashar, if you look at it. I mean, I used to watch that there will be protagonists who is a, let's say, lower caste, let's say, not really Hindu, but there was this famous director, Salahuddin Lavlu, who is few dramas would have very, very secular. He would try to, sort of portray that. But now today there is a lot of young directors have come up, not only in natos but in the films, and they are very, very dedicated towards the religion, and there would be a forceful placing of religious scenes, or let's say religious tones, and so on. I mean, I thought that if you can sort of shed some light further on this, then how it's going to.
So these are good questions and poignant observation. I did explain in my book. Maybe get hold of that book because it's a new study. I did my PhD on that. Came out in 2020. I could send you a copy, the e version. That how many drivers, including capitalism, have fostered this. But also in my book, I problematize the problematization of religion. Right? I mean, why we problematize religion in social science is that because we were trained to see through secular perspective, right? But if you read my book, I argued that there are indigenous political identities that are not being ingrained in literatures like international relations, which are heavily westernized and Western focused. Whereas, which is also part of Amartya Sen's argument that how clash of civilization and this thesis has pursued and ignored the local man's voice. But having said that, I fully sympathize with the idea because in my research in 2017 I interviewed members of minority groups that how do they feel about how Islam is being constructed. So that study is about talking with focus group discussion with minorities, in focus group discussion with people who identify with them as conservative and they also identify, and others who identify them as secular. And I'm not gonna name them. That one very prominent leader, you know him, so I'm not gonna name his name because of ethical reason, who leads who is a leading figure in Bangladesh atheist movement. He said to me in that interview, which I mentioned in my report and article, that he cannot proclaim himself as atheist publicly. Then even the secular movement will lose support because so it shows that they do not see secularism as devoid of religion. That's number one. So in my book, I argued that there are three streams of religious politics that is taking place. One is the more open, more plural, but is still biased majoritarian religion. Then there is this, which is advanced by Army League and BNP. And then there is this religious parties like Hizbut Tahrir, like Jamaat Islami, who are radical, not necessarily engaged with extremism. And then mostly, at least party policy wise, and the final one and the third one is extremist, the militants and so forth. So once we do not see that there are diversity in that interpretation of religion in Bangladesh, then we'll not get what is really happening. We do have to change the perspective, at least that I argued in my book and my thesis, that we need to see it from secular prism. It's not going to make any sense because it has never been secular. I've kept saying it. I spent my 4 years of my life to write that book, 6 years in fact, to demonstrate that it is not secular. It has never been secular. And the problem is that because of this politicization of secularism, which doesn't necessarily mean that it is reflected through the state policies and institution, the minorities, especially mostly Hindu and Christian and Buddhist and others, became a political football. And and it's very unfortunate because they do have lack of sense of security. And even though there is this myth that one party has been advancing secularism in their policy, but if you study the attack against minorities since 1972 until today, it's been persisting. Mostly surrounded about taking over their land, taking over their properties, and a lot of eventually migrated to India. And this has been a dominant social pattern which is again masked under the politicization of the word secularism and so forth, which had never been reflected into the state policies. So that's number one. Number two is because of the and the second problem is many people who advance, and the crisis you see in Bangladesh today is really a crisis of democracy. So just think of this way, and even think of your perspective. You're a young man, and you cannot express freely. You cannot even hold talk freely, and you live in a society where being religious is good. I guess it's same in many houses in India, that you pray, you do puja, you do go to mandir and so forth. And it is, our societies are appreciate conservatism to some extent, and then when politics mixes with it, it goes to haywire. But the point is, it is risky to do any other politics than Army League. And most people, especially the country is now full of young people. Most people were not born in 1971. They didn't see the war. They grew up listening to the history, and then they grew up in this long Army League period where there was no free and fair election since 2009, which is a fact. So under this, there are two options. One, you join politics, or join the politics of ruling party, or two, you don't do anything, because if you do join other politics, you become risky. And there is one study conducted by International Republican Institute, which they did not share with the Bangladeshi government. They found that correlation between some militants and authoritarianism. So there is this relationship between, I've spoken about this with an Indian official who reached out to me few couple of years ago to understand what's really happening, and I told them that if you do not see this, that or there is a correlation between authoritarianism and religious conservatism and radicalism, you'll miss the overall point. So it's just not one aspect. Everything is connected in the society, right? And if you do not, so how to go about it is you need to open up, like 90s Bangladesh, where. So I'll finish with this: is that in 1990s, I don't know whether you have heard of Bangladeshi rock and roll music like James, Ayub Bachchan and stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they used to be the pop figure, and now the pop figures are the people who do what? Why is that? Right? I mean, they used to be public figure. People used to go in the field and see them, but now who are the pop stars, quote unquote, is the people, the young preachers, and that shift is only happened because of there is so much. um control on free speech in the country. So you just can't persist secularism in the name of authoritarianism and then see this. So this is going to happen, and I hope at some point you also you're very important as as a scholar of Bangladesh. And in Bangladesh is important neighbor in India, and India sees Bangladesh through this security perspective, but they also need to understand the social shift that has taken place in the past decade. Without that, we would not. The Bangladesh remains a paradox and puzzle.
Yeah, very interesting. Again, so uh, I mean, I have still been the fan of James
Yeah, me too.
uh,
I'm still.
and Ayub Bachchu's Haste Dekho. So
Yes.
it's I mean, we sleep with this song and sort of eat with this song. So needless to say, and as you said, it's sad
There
to
is
see
no
that.
there is no James and Ayub Bachchu, new James, new Ayub Bachchu anymore.
Yes, yes. And I mean, the new generation, and very sadly, I mean, it's full of the social media, YouTube, Facebook, it's full of this Islamic preachers. Those are being sort of held as the new generation role models. And, which is again, so there
So
is, as
I
you said,
just want to one point before going that one of the reason is that many of the people who do perpetrated themselves as a candle bearer of secularism has sided with authoritarian repression, and that
Yes.
kind of pushed away the young generation from that. And that's the really no. I understand secularism as a liberal idea that would perpetrate justice and humanity, irrespective of their faith. So that's not happened. So when these people sided with authoritarian repression, then they lost some support. And what is interesting is that you used to see Bengali middle class coming from university and so forth, but there is this highly educated and new middle class coming. They are mostly are premised on religiosity, not necessarily radicalism, but conservative. So this is going to be the case, and I think that's the case in India too, to some extent. So maybe this is the sign of current time.
Yeah, yeah. So I would sort of open the floor. If there is any questions, I will take 2 or 3 questions and then we'll close this session. Uh, question থাকলে you can go ahead. Or
Sir,
else,
I have a question.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you, sir. I'm Zulfikar Ahmed, a student in Department of International Relations. As precisely you mentioned that in Bangladeshi secularism there is heavy impact, or you can say that a Bangladeshi variant of secularism is deriving aspirations from Islamic value. So we also see we find some similarity within India, because if we see the variant of secularism which is the constitutional base of secularism in India, it is not some sort of separation between church and religion, or as you say the classical French secularism. Rather, it is based on a concept called Sarva Dharma Sambhavna, I mean harmony of all religion. Even we see the secular values in India also derive from some Hindu scriptures. For example, take the quote Satyamev Jayate, the national motto of India. It has roots to Mundaka Upanishad, which is a Hindu scripture. So I want to precisely ask you that, as you said that to you, secularism is a liberal idea which pursue justice. So is it really possible to, pursue this liberal idea or to pursue justice when we are deriving inspiration from religion? I mean, is it really because in India, certain I have studied, I have read secularism, understand secularism through context of India. So many scholars argue that when we derive the concept of secularism from some no very popular entity, in case of India that is Hinduism, in case of Bangladesh that is Islam. So it actually socially legitimize secularism, because in these developing society the secular concept is often seen as an alien or foreign concept. So do you believe that what is your take on this as a scholar, that uh, is it the fair model, or we really do need to adopt a different form of model? I mean, do we need to shed secularism from these roots? I have second a small question, that is, when you say that for the founder of Bangladeshi Nationalist Party BNP, the leader, I'm forget his name, is Ziaur Rahman. Yeah, Ziaur Rahman. So, what was his idea on secularism? I mean, did he precisely make any comment on idea of secularism, or he followed the continuous process of the? Yeah, thank you very much, sir.
So, I do not have any. So there is one. That was the one of the core premise of my talk, is that there is this models of secularism which are very nice. There, also religious countries could be. There are good ideas in religion if you talk about higher philosophy in Hinduism and also Islam and so forth. But your question, if I understand correctly, is that about the theoretical aspect of secularism, right? And if there is a regional nature of it, and is it good and something? I have no objection to any secular ideas, My problem is whether these fine theories are being interpreted as equally and justly to the state through the state mechanism and policies. That is my problem, is that, if you look into, I really would appreciate if you look into my book again. I'll send it to Subhajit, and Subhajit could send it to all of you, is that the question, in fact, is not on the theory. So that my book is, one person could be, so let me break it down, simplify it. One person could call himself as a religious person, religious Muslim, for example. Okay. I see your name is Muslim. So my name is, I'm Muslim, so I'll put it that way. But how they spend money explains his characteristic, whether they're going to nightclub, alcohol, uh, all sorts of stuff. If they do that, then if theoretically he claims himself as a religious person, he's not, right? I mean, that's what I did in my book as well, that there is this beautiful theory of secularism and so forth, but it's not really being implemented. Even if you argue that religious, there are some solution of secularism in religion, and even if you take that point into account, you don't see the evidence in practice. So the summary is that there is this discrepancy between religion and between the regional explanation of religion and regional definition of secularism, and in practice, at least in Bangladeshi case, that I know, that is not being reflected at all. And also the second point is that Ziaur Rahman did not keep secularism in the constitution. Again, I would encourage you all to move away from this prism of what is endorsed in constitution. That really doesn't matter in Bangladesh. It could be anything, because Bangladesh has the finest law of freedom of speech protection, but it has been performing under Afghanistan. It's worse than Afghanistan when it is come to journalism, free journalism. So there is this constitutional prism of looking into country, unfortunately doesn't make sense in Bangladesh. So what I argued in my book, that Jia expanded of what Mujib did, but even though Mujib did not mention secularism in the constitution, I've given evidence. I also should have said Bangabandhu. I didn't give just because of the law. It didn't give any. I have demonstrated policies after policies which are religiously biased. So if the constitution is secular and the policies are religiously biased, then it really doesn't matter what's written in the constitution. So I would, again, maybe the most practical way for us as a scholar, and you are also going to be a scholar, is that to move away from the theory, or at least see whether the theory is being applied in practice. And to do that, very easy, my method was to see the speeches how the party platforms are used religion, and also where the state invested money. And that's really important to understand. If the state doesn't invest money in secularism, then if it talks about constitutionally endorsing secularism, it really doesn't matter anyway, at least to me. And that was my argument. I hope I could answer some of your question, Julfikar.
Thank you very much, sir. I got you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think we don't have questions from the audience anymore. But then I would sort of then like to conclude and just say that probably state sort of started shifting its goalposts when it comes to being a secular institution, as you just said that how the state itself as a secular institution has basically changed its. So the mask has fallen, and state itself is playing its own kind of notion. So state is basically imposing the religious notions of the ruling party. So it's
Yes,
a kind
very
of
nice. Thank you.
so I mean, it's really great. I mean, I'm really overwhelmed, and you know that we have an emotional connect. I mean,
Yes,
with
of course.
Bangladesh. Yeah.
Of course.
So and we have been inviting the deputy ambassador of Bangladesh here in the camp.
They will say different story.
Yeah. So that's the probably reason why a
Yeah.
scholar would do sort of intervene.
No, before finish, I just wanted to say that, since you are scholars, be pragmatic. That is the most
Yeah.
you could do, and be skeptic. That's the
Yeah.
fundamental of being scholar. Thank you all.
Yeah. So thank you so much, and also it's online, but I would welcome you to visit
Yes.
Kolkata anytime, whenever you visit
Yes, of
Kolkata.
course. I have friends. I have friends there.
Yeah.
Of course.
So I would love to host you in person,
Yes.
and I hope that our students would love to sort of interact with you.
Yes.
It's great that we did this, and I'm sure that it would add to the new nuances on the discussion that is going on, the internal perspectives on Bangladesh. So with these words, once again, on behalf of the Department of International Relations of the university, I thank you, Dr. Hasan.
Thank you, Shubhajit, and everyone else. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Sleep time for me. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.